These sims make me sick. Literally, not figuratively. Automobilista 2, R Factor 2, Red Sport Beta, BeamMG, and even Hell Let Loose when crawling. And Hell Let Loose is a sim. Anything with good grass is a sim. The problem is with these games, and many games, is they don't have camera filtering and camera options that are conducive to making the games comfortable for people that suffer from motion sickness. And me being old and mentally impaired, mostly from playing too many driving simulators, is one of those people. What's bizarre when it comes to driving simulators is we have games like iRacing, and iRacing actually does the best job of this, but iRacing, ACC, AC1, where you have a mixture of options that are really good for accommodating people with motion sickness. Specifically, iRacing's head neck filter, which filters out movements of the car, so when you go over bumps, everything stays nice and stable and smooth, and you can actually adjust that. And then with ACC and AC1, you can do things, and Race Room actually, you can do lock to horizon, which might look artificial, and you know, when you're playing a game with lock to horizon, it'll look like the car's bumping around and moving around and you know, tilting up and down and stuff. It might look artificial, but that actually works really well for many people with motion sickness, and also people using VR. Now, I know some of you are immediately going to go, but Game of Muscle, Automobilista 2 has 2 camera settings, and R Factor 2 has 3 camera settings to reduce motion. Yes, they do, but they are absolutely atrocious and not very adjustable. So one of the really big things with motion sickness is that different people will respond to the view from the game and how that makes them motion sick in different ways, and sometimes in counterintuitive and completely opposite ways. So for some people, using AMS2 as an example, having the car, or any game, having the car locked to the, having the camera locked to the car, so the camera's moving around like this with the car, and as a result the view is moving around, that for some people will actually reduce motion sickness for them and not cause motion sickness, because they link that up in the head with it being the motion that's currently happening in the game. And Bob's your Uncle Fanny's right, they're not getting motion sick at all. But then for other people, having things locked to the car 100% will absolutely wreck them. Also, for some people, having the actual full lock to horizon, having the car tilt and roll like that, perceptually that will make them really motion sick. Whereas for other people, being able to fixate and focus on the road surface and basically ignore the car, that is what doesn't cause motion sickness. AMS2 though is honestly the absolute worst offender. Now, you can set a somewhat lock to horizon with AMS2, but what you'll find is if you set it to full lock to horizon, either on their the original head motion versus the newer head motion option they've got, what happens is when you get to like a certain angle, it then goes from lock to horizon, where the car's moving up and down hills, so the car cockpit is like staying stable but your camera's moving. It will go like, you'll go to Eau Rouge, you'll get to a certain angle, and then all of a sudden it goes full lock to the car, and then it's almost it's literally like it's locked, and then it goes unlocked again. First of all, Reza, the simplest fix is if you can increase that clip angle, or make it so that you can actually have way more angle before it does get to lock. There's probably a line of code specifically for that variable. If you can increase that by a large amount, oh my god, that will be amazing for me and for a lot of people that use the pure lock to horizon. Also with AMS2, when you go through a bank corner, say like an oval bank, and you've got lock to horizon for the roll on, it's the reset for the roll is really slow, and just, it's as if they've designed it to be the worst possible reset for that. And you'll notice it if you're going around even like a small bank corner, like the tight right-hander at Alton Park. It's like, oh my god, you tried to break my brain. So just those settings really need to be adjusted. Maybe make the return faster. I don't know. Just copy Race Room or how it works in AC or ACC, you know, if you're just going to do the basic lock to horizon. But the crucial thing is, it really is that the biggest thing is not really the lock to horizon necessarily. Having that's great, but the neck filtering, the bump filtering, so the camera just stays stable on the horizon. So it's almost like you can have the best of lock to the cockpit, but without that bumpiness and noise that's really headache inducing for a lot of people. Now, not to complain too much about AMS2, but it is a really good example of this. You can use the G head movement to add, you know, like when you're braking, accelerating and going up and down vertical loads to move the camera about. I get it. Some people like that. It does add immersion to some people. And weirdly, it can actually, accidentally, the head movement can filter out some of the faster bumps of the suspension with stuff. In AMS2 and other sims, fortunately, you can normally turn them to 0 if you want to. Fantastic. Give the people the option. But it's worth saying, I've noticed a lot of comments when I've talked about motion sickness with AMS2. People confuse these G camera movements and using those settings as a way to actually filter the view and make it look smoother. So really important is that the developers actually label things correctly so that you have the neck filtering like iRacing to keep the head as smooth as possible, but for those people that want to also add those movements, they can do. But those movements do not filter the stuff out, and if you've been in a real car, your head does not float around like this normally. Maybe it does if your head's on a spring. That might apply to some sim racers. Who knows? Sim racers are totally mental. So just to talk about motion sickness and how it actually applies with simulators and how it relates to real life, it's actually really not motion sickness. It's kind of back to front motion sickness. But what you'll find is very much like actual real world motion sickness. Certain frequencies really affect people more than other frequencies. So what I mean by that is you'll find with like road cars that have really sloppy suspension in real life, that actually causes sickness in people, especially if it's really, really smooth. So sometimes really good cars in real life, you would think, and trains as well, that go through corners and glide through stuff, you think, oh, that's perfect. The passengers can't notice it. Actually, that, it turns out, for the majority of people, makes them really sick. And it's the same with driving simulators, though slightly back to front, in that certain degrees of smoothing, so like in AMS2, when the car comes back from having rotation and it straightens back up, having that come back really slowly after you've come out the corner at the frequency that they've picked is actually probably the worst thing to possibly do. Whereas having it come back at a certain speed quicker or snapping in some case or whatever, that could actually be a lot better for people. Ultimately, as I say, the crux of it is to have the options there for each component of either camera rotation, pitch, roll, and then neck filter, so bump removal, so cars doing this but the camera's basically staying still. Having options for each of them is the crucial thing that all simulators need to do, and it should literally be a basic. Sorry developers, it's yet another tedious thing to implement, but it's something that has to be done in simulators. I think all games should do it. With VR, for example, which obviously I'm a huge VR hobbyist going back years, a lot of these motion sickness things actually came to the forefront, and by default in a lot of VR games, a lot of these things are really well understood. Unfortunately, for some reason with Sims, we kind of are in this murky ground where a lot of the lessons haven't been learnt. So a huge shout out to Real Head Motion in particular, which is a mod for Assetto Corsa, which gets you the iRacing type lock to horizon within a certain range, allowing you to control pitch, roll, yaw, and a whole bunch of other stuff, velocity smoothing and all these things. So huge shout out to Real Head Motion mod for Assetto Corsa. I highly recommend trying that if you want camera filtering, but you don't want it to be full lock to horizon with Assetto Corsa. And of course, a huge, massive shout out to iRacing, predominantly for the way that their neck filtering works. And just to say, compare it to real life, I've fortunately been an idiot YouTuber that's very lucky, it doesn't deserve it. I have been around the Nordschleife in 3 cars. I've been in a Radical SR3, Aerial Atom, a Lamborghini, God knows what, like Ferraris, McLaren's. I've been in a lot of cars on both public roads and Silverstone, Blyton Park, Donington, multiple racetracks. And what you'll find is on racetracks, or Spa, on racetracks, they're generally really, really quite smooth. And one thing that you find is when you're driving a car on a track, you can really clearly see the road surface right into the distance. It's not hard to fixate on a single thing. And if the car in real life bumps and moves, those G-forces help sort of preempt your eyes to like refocus on something. Like the same as if you're walking. If you're walking along, you can focus and hold focus like a hawk looking into the distance at a vole escaping, that's your dinner, you can focus on stuff really, really far away, completely intuitively, without you just like, oh, I want to look at that, and you can move your head around. In fact, do that now with your finger, move your head around. You can keep your eye on it really easy. But if you have like a video game bumping you around and moving you all over the place, well, you're not getting the instructions that your brain automatically uses to calibrate that eye focus on the object. Also, in real life, your eyes have it's like a gel. Your eyes are sort of suspended. The reason why they're squishy, or one of the reasons why they're squishy and the size that they are, is that it mitigates vibrations and bumps to keep an image smooth. Even if you're walking, moving around, or being jolted, your brain has a load of filtering in it to deal with the noisy image to smooth it out. Your neck and all your meat also does a really good job of filtering bumps and things out to make it a really smooth image. So when you're playing a video game and it's super duper bumpy and all this stuff's going on, even outside of lock to horizon tilt, that's really not what it's like in real life. Unless, in real life, when you're driving like a go-kart or you're on certain public roads with tight suspension, you get these really high, you can get certain frequency vibrations which actually just match with the resonant frequency of your eye sockets, and it can just be very vibrating. But in those scenarios, the motions do go into you, and there is a degree of more compensation that I don't think you get with Sims, and at least it all lines up, even if you can't see properly because your eyes are vibrating. Don't know what to say other than to drive a go-kart or go on a mountain bike down a steep hill, and then you'll experience that eye vibration, which is very annoying when it actually happens. So the biggest takeaway, like a family of 12's curry order, is that simulators need to give the options. They need to copy iRacing's neck filter, and then they also need to offer ways of doing lock to horizon and the roll of the car and how that then relates to the player and then how that resets. That needs to have options as well. More options, the better. Fine, put it in a text file outside the game if you have to. Ideally have it in the game, but it needs to be there. That way, everybody is ultimately accommodated, and that's the main thing. You don't want to exclude people from your games just because they're old, bold, and moan and complain all the time about literally everything, and they just need to drink more tea and shut up. Don't exclude people. Big credit, though, before we go, to Magic FR, who is the developer of the Real Head Motion add-on for Assetto Corsa 1, and it also works in ACC. That's worth trying out. We're saying a lot of people use that to actually add in weird, like, look to apex from the wheel and a bunch of really stupid settings. It's up to them. They could do those stupid settings if they want to. But the way I use it is to use its lock to horizon primarily, which just filters out all the bumps and things as well. It works very well in AC and ACC, or reasonably well at least, and it's probably better than the defaults in those games. Unfortunately, none of the add-ons, we even got one of our viewers actually created a mod for rFactor 2. Unfortunately, it couldn't fix the high frequency roll vibrations in rFactor 2 for the roll lock to horizon, so we were still getting a lot of noise, and it was still causing headaches and issues with motion sickness. So it'd be really nice if rFactor 2 could actually expose the roll lock to horizon and the head filtering options more. That'd be really nice. But yeah, the more options, the better. Get on it, developers. Please, I would really like to play more rFactor 2. I would really like to play more AMS2 and not just on flat tracks. And I'd like to play more Rennsport beta as well. And also I'd like to play more Hell Let Loose without getting motion sick when crawling. There's a new Battle of Fallujah or something. That game has the camera all over the place. It should, for an FPS, it should literally just be locked to the mouse movement. Because it turns out, this is something we discovered with VR, is that if you have it so that the movement is only happens based off what the player's actually inputted, and it's not smoothed out, that is actually much better for the vast majority of people for motion sickness. So it's not just a problem with Sims, it's also a problem with FPS games and everything. But more settings, the better. My God, will this guy shut up? Only when he drinks tea. Thank you very much for watching this. You know I'm right. You know it needs to be done. You can't disagree with me because what I've said accommodates everyone. It just wastes the time of developers. Thank you very much for watching this. If you enjoyed it, click the subscribe button, click the like button, and cry yourself to sleep every night for being a hobby of sim racing. Oh my god. Take care and goodbye.